the famous joke, I guess, of the Jew that got lost, and he ended up in an isolated island, and he's searching to find maybe there's someone else, another Jew that lives there. And after a few days of searching, he finally finds a person, a Jew, the only Jew on the island. So excited, he asks him, "Oh, how are you living here? Do you have a synagogue you go to?" He says, "Sure, we have two." So he says, "I understand, you're the only Jew here. Why do you need two?" So he said, "This is a synagogue I go to, and this is the one I don't go to." Right? So 2 Jews, 3 opinions. That's but in this week's Torah portion, a lot of it is discussing the different tribes and the different shvatim, the different tribes that there were, and how the Jews were split when it came to camping, when it came to traveling, and when it came to counting them. And the question is, why is there this divide into 12, 13 tribes? Why can't it just be one unit, one nation, one unit with one purpose, with one? Why is there these divisions between the Jewish nation, as we shall soon see? This week's Torah portion, we start the 4th book of the Torah, the book of Bamidbar, the book of Numbers. Numbers is not a direct translation of Bamidbar. Bamidbar means within the desert. Numbers, it's called the book of Numbers because there's a lot of counting going on. This week's Torah portion starts with counting, and the Jews are counted right in the beginning of this week's Torah portion. It takes up quite a little bit of the parsha. So therefore, it's called the book of Numbers. It's not only the English translation, or probably the Greek translation, but the rabbis also refer to this book as Chumash HaPikudim, the book of Numbers. And because of the great place the counting takes in this book and in this week's Torah portion. Speaking in general about the book of Bamidbar, the 4th book of the Torah, it has relatively few laws in comparison to the other books. The book of Shmos, the 2nd book, Exodus, Leviticus, has many laws. Most of it is different commandments, different specific commandments of the 613 mitzvahs. However, the book of Bamidbar relatively has much less laws, and it's much more describing what happened to the Jewish nation while they were in the desert. It could be split into 2 halves. There are 10 parshiyot, 10 Torah portions in the book of Bamidbar. The first 5 is pretty much what happened the first year, all the way until the story of the spies. And then the last 5 Torah portions, it's records pretty much what happened the last year when the Jews were right before entering the land of Israel. So even though this book covers all 40 years, but it sort of favors the first year and the last year, and the occurrences of those 2 years take over most of the book, most of the stories that are recorded and given over in the book. So that's regarding the book of Bamidbar in general, which again we're starting in this week. The topics in Bamidbar in this week's Torah portion is really seemingly all about divisions. It starts off, the first part is about counting the Jewish nation. Hashem tells Moshe and Aaron that I want you to count the Jewish nation. Why is Hashem counting the Jewish nation now? So Rashi comments, it's out of love because Hashem appreciates them and cherishes us so much, so therefore he constantly counts us whenever there's a reasonable opportunity. So just like someone that has something very cherishable, very precious, you count. People count money. They count something that is precious to them. So Os Hashem, he counts the Jewish nation every once in a while, whenever something happens, after something happens. So here also he counts them before the Mishkan actually goes into full swing, before Hashem actually rests and the day-to-day services in the Mishkan and the tabernacle start. Hashem counts them. And that's the first part of this week's Torah portion, counting the Jewish nation. The way they were counted, they weren't just counted all tribes, how many all Jews were, but they're counted in tribes. Every tribe was counted, and the sum total of each tribe is listed, and is listed in the Torah. It is interesting to note, this is a comment that the Rebbe spoke once when he was discussing this week's Torah portion in 1987. He pointed out that if you look closely into the text, to the way the Torah records the numbers of each tribe, for all the tribes, the Torah says starts the verse with a Hebrew letter of Lamed, like it says Livnei Shimon, for the children of Shimon, the tribe of Shimon. So they had such amount of number. Then it said, for example, Livnei Gad, for the children of God, their numbers were so and so. So it always says that it has the Hebrew letter of Lamed. The verse starts with the Hebrew letter of Lamed, which could mean for. Like for this tribe, the amount was this much. For that tribe, the amount was this much. However, when it comes to the last tribe that was counted, the tribe of Naphtali, it doesn't have that Hebrew letter of Lamed. It just says the children of Naphtali, their sum total was this amount. It doesn't say for the children of Naphtali. And it's this difference is very evident because it's a list. The verses are one after another. So you see how each verse starts with the word for, and the last one doesn't. Now, sometimes, just like when you write an article or a book, so it's the way you write, you don't start every sentence the same, right? Even if you're bringing something that's repetitive, you try to change it up to make it a little different. So the simple reason why the Torah drops the Lamed by the end, the word for by the end, is to change it. No, that's the way, like the regular way of writing, the proper way of writing. But the Rebbe quoted then that the Arizal says a very interesting idea, and he gives insight in how exactly the counting took place. So he said the messengers of Moshe, the leaders of the tribes, the people that worked for them, they went around and they wrote down everyone's name and which tribe they came from. So they wrote down this person, let's say they wrote down one person's name and they wrote he comes from the tribe of Shimon. Then they went to the next tent. Oh, what's your name? They wrote down the name, down his age, and they wrote, oh, he's from the tribe of Gad. And they went to the next person. He's from the tribe of Naphtali. So they made a list of everyone's names, and they took down their names and which tribe they belonged to. Then, when it came to counting, to figuring out how many people there were in each tribe, so then the people that had the list called out that, okay, so these groups of people, they're from the tribe of Shimon. So they crossed them out of the list that they had, and then they wrote these people are for Shimon. These people are for Gad. These people are for Reuven, etc. But when it came after they took out each name, so to speak, from the list, they announced it and then they crossed out from the list. So whoever was left, those were part of the tribe of Naphtali. So they didn't have to say for the tribe of Naphtali because they were the ones left on the list. Almost they were like copying and pasting or cutting and pasting from this list to the other list. And then once everyone is in their proper, Excel sheet, so then they're just left with the people of Naphtali. So it doesn't have to say for the people for the tribe of Naphtali. It just says the tribe of Naphtali because they were left. 4 indicates that they were being transferred from the original list, the initial list, to the more particular list where each tribe's members were listed. So that's the interesting idea that the Arizal says how the census took place, and it also explains based on that the technical reason why the Torah drops the letter Lamed, the word for, when it comes to the final tribe, because they are left on the sheet, they're left on the list. They didn't have to be transferred to any other list. So that's one topic of this week's Torah portion, the topic of counting. How many Jews there were, and how many were in each particular tribe, and the sum total. And again, the way they're counted each tribe individually. They weren't counted as one unit as a whole. Then the Torah continues and discusses the way they camped. They traveled for 40 years, but at this point, they're hoping to enter Israel pretty soon, but they were meant to travel. And between the travels, they camped. The camp was still. So they camped also in an ordinary fashion. Each tribe, so they camped around the tabernacle. The tabernacle was in the middle, and on each side there were 3 tribes. 3 tribes camped out, and in each direction, and each one made up like a smaller unit. There was one main tribe. For example, Yehudah was the main tribe, and that's how they camped. So they camped individually. They camped each tribe uniquely, separate from. They didn't just camp all mingled together, all mixed together. They camped each one individually. And again, so we see this idea how the tribes really camped individually, and even more than that, the tribes had banners. Each one had like a flag, a banner that identified that tribe. And this idea of camping, it wasn't just something that just happened, just a technical thing. It's actually something the Jews really desired. There's a medrash which says the following. When God revealed himself upon Mount Sinai, 22 myriads of angels descended with him. He had tons of angels with him. As it states, God's entourage is twice 10,000, thousands of angels. And all of these angels, all of these thousands of angels were arranged in orderly camps, banner by banner. There were groups of angels. There's different groups of angels. And the Jews saw all of this whole vision during the time when they were by Mount Sinai, when they were receiving the Torah. When Israel saw that the angels were arranged banner by banner, they too began to desire it to be arranged by banners. Israel said, would it be that we would be arranged according to banners, surrounding the divine presence like angels? So when the Jews saw by the giving of the Torah how there are many, many angels, thousands of angels, but they were all grouped together into groups, and they surrounded Hashem with banners. So they also desired to be surrounded by to surround the Mishkan, the tabernacle, where the divine presence is revealed, where Hashem's presence is felt. Also, they desired to surround it with banners, in groups and by banners. The message continues. Similarly, it states, Psalms, may we sing for joy at your salvation, and raise our banner in the name of our God. The Holy One, blessed be He, said to Israel, what do you desire? To be arranged according to banners? I swear by your lives that I will fulfill your requests. Thus, it states immediately afterwards, Hashem will fulfill all your requests. Thereupon, the Holy One, blessed be He, made known His love for Israel and said to Moses, go and arrange them into banners around the tabernacle as they desired. So we see this, that the Jews were arranged into groups, and each one had their banner, had their flag, which is described in this week's Torah portion, wasn't just by chance, wasn't just something technical. It's something they desired. They saw something special about it, and they requested it, and Hashem fulfilled the request. And the question is, what's so unique? What's so special that each tribe is individual? On the contrary, one may argue that it's better if there won't be divisions, won't be different, everyone camping in their individual tribe and having their individual banner, individual flag, and identification. It should be one nation. How did the banners look? So Rashi gives a comment in this week's Torah portion. It says that they camped with signs. So he said every division shall have its own flag staff with a colored flag hanging on it, the color of one being different from the color of the other, of any other. Which color did they use? The color of each one was like the shade of its stone, like the shade of its stone set in the choshen, which was worn by the Kohen Gadol. And in this way, everyone could recognize his division. The Kohen Gadol, some of you may recall, had a choshen, had a breastplate. And in that choshen, there were stones, 12 stones, one for each tribe, and each tribe had his name engraved on a different type of stone. So every stone had a different color, had a different shade. So their banners were, the color of the banners were identical to the shades of that tribe's particular stone in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle, on the Kohen's breastplate, on his choshen. So, and in addition to the color that each flag had, they also had different symbols. Dan had a snake, and each one had their individual symbol on their flag. And again, why does each one have their own color, their own flag, their own symbol? Why can't everyone just be one unit? This division between the tribes was not just in the time of when they traveled in the desert. One may argue that maybe it was important that when they're traveling, they should travel in an ordinary fashion, so they had to be split into tribes. But it wasn't just that. It continued. Each one got their own individual, distinct portion of the land of Israel. Israel was split into portions for each tribe. And it is interesting that if there's a city that the Torah says that you should there's a mitzvah in the Torah that you should set courthouses. Should be courts, rabbinical courts that could rule for if there's any conflict. And one of the laws is that every tribe should have their own court based in. And what's interesting, if there's a city that is split between two tribes, there should be two courts, two basins in that city. And typically, we usually try there should only be one court, one main court in a city, not two. But here, since it's split into two tribes, there are two courts. So again, you see that this division between the tribes wasn't just in the desert. It continued afterwards. And it also says in Yechezkel that that when Mashiach comes, there are going to be 12 gates, one for each tribe. And one of Mashiach's jobs is to tell everyone which tribe they come from. And nowadays, most people don't know which tribe they come from. a Kohen or a Levi, they know which tribe they come from. It's passed down. They kept it careful to pass it down in the family, so they know which tribe they come from. But most people don't know which tribe they come from. And when Mashiach comes, he's going to tell everyone from which tribe they come from. Now, again, so we see that this distinction between tribes, this division, which is seemingly a division, is something that is going to be kept. And it was in the desert, and when the Jews entered into Israel, and it was also now, and it's going to be when Mashiach comes. We're going to bring it back when everyone will find out exactly which tribe they come from. And the question obviously is, why is there this division? What's so unique about that there are 12 tribes, that they're counted individually, and that they camp individually? Why can't there just be one unit? Anyone has any thoughts about this? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking that there used to be, each tribe had its own siddur or their own liturgy, and the Arizal came along and made a gate that was open to all the 12 tribes, that sort of transcended the division, and that everyone was able to enter through that gate of the Arizal's liturgy.
So you bring up an idea, which we're going to touch upon later. So you're saying that each one had their own siddur, or their own, at least partially, some of the different amendments to the siddur, which each one had individual. But that doesn't really explain why there's a difference. You're just saying that there's also, in addition to the differences we spoke, there's also a difference in the prayers, right?
Yeah, no, but I'm adding also that the Arizal was able to transcend the differences of the tribes and say, here's the 13th gate, right, that all the other 12 tribes can come through this gate and all be together.
Right. So then why don't we just start off that way? Meaning that there's a inclusive gate, or is that because people don't know which tribe they're from? But if you wouldn't know which tribe, it's better if you use the siddur of your tribe, or it's because, meaning, is that the proper way it should be, or that's after the fact? After the fact that we don't know which tribe we're from, so then okay, then we'll use that version, which is a general version.
I'm not sure if it's connected, but I'm thinking that the cherubim didn't start off facing each other, but that was our job to get them to face each other. So maybe that has something to do with it, right. Or maybe as it's coming closer to Mashiach, maybe now's the time for the 13th gate that'll be all inclusive.
Right. You see, there's always, whenever we have things like this, that, for example, like this idea that really everyone should have their own siddur, but now there's all inclusive. So is that an advantage, or is that like that we rather everyone have their individual siddur? So
sounds like an advantage.
Right. Sounds like on the one hand, but on the other hand, we said it didn't start off that way. So it seems like the proper way to do it is everyone to have their individual siddur. But maybe there is also an advantage there. Everything has also its advantages, even if it's something that's only after the fact, right? Yeah.
Did I unmute? Yeah. It's a very interesting discussion, because we have it very often about the structure of this country. It is a republic in addition to the central kind of governing. I believe that it gives the society much more democratic way of being managed. It really allows each tribe to have individual saying in the whole idea for how the whole nation is managed. And I believe that it really is a huge advantage of keeping tribes. At that time, it was maybe just a specific purposes or specific, maybe even some a little bit cultural differences. But in general, I believe as more power is to a citizen is less, it would become kind of a more, I don't know, where the governing is not as democratic, it's not as fair.
Things like more balanced when everyone is.
Right. Yeah, I think that it gives the whole process of governing a nation much more organized and a little bit more individually geared way of creating laws, creating different rules for the whole nation. It's wonderful when people have the same goal, when they have a similar philosophy, but to keep individual tribe with their power to make some kind of maybe something that is important for their own identity is very, very valuable. That's why I really applaud that. I think it's a very positive way of managing a nation.
All right. So we're going to go in that direction, but we're going to add a more spiritual spin to it.
Okay.
Right, in the service of Hashem. But yeah, that's definitely the direction that we're heading. So regarding the counting and the way the Jews count, there's a very technical idea that is brought up by some of the commentaries, which is that the Jews were supposed to enter the land of Israel, which was very possibly able to take over the land of Israel, which was able to end up in a war. And they therefore were split into, they were counted. And therefore the people that were counted were people that were in the age to go into the army. And they also camped in a certain manner that in case anyone attacks them, they should be protected. Yehudah was from the front because he was the strongest. The tribes that were in the back would have the largest population. So again, also protection if someone attacks them from the back. And this idea, the Rashbam and Abarbanel, they bring up and develop how it was really a preparation for war, or in case of war, in case of being attacked. That's why they're counted. That's why they're split up in this manner. And while that's definitely an explanation that's brought down, but we'd like to go maybe a little deeper. And we start with a story of there was a famous Hasidic Rebbe called the Rebbe of Kansk. And the story goes that one time a individual, one of his followers, came to him, sad, depressed, crying, and really disturbed, and told us. So he asked him, what happened? What's wrong? So he started to tell him his life story. So a young person, a person at the age of his 30s, and he got married a few years before, and like the way it was then, it was a very common practice that the father-in-law would sometimes support his son-in-law. His son-in-law was someone that was devoted to study of Torah, so he would support him after their wedding. So like this, he could devote his time and his energies in praying and in learning. And that's how it went for a few years after he was married. And then all of a sudden, his father-in-law passed away. Suddenly passed away. Which meant for the son-in-law that he has to take over, that he has to find a job. And it turned out that he took over the family business. He went into the family business and he took over his father-in-law's businesses. But however, that obviously took a lot of time from him, and he wasn't able to devote the same amount of time that he has been doing prior to the study of Torah and to prayers, and obviously took a lot of his energy. And for this reason, he was very sad. Look, for the past almost 30 years of my life, or 25 years of my life, I was devoted to the study of Torah, to praying. I led a totally spiritual life. And now all of a sudden I have this load. I have to be involved in worldly matters and materialistic matters. I have to run the business. I have to take care, everything, all the headaches that running a business goes with, and everything that it means. And for him, it meant that he wasn't able to devote that amount of time. So therefore, he came to his rabbi. What should I do? What should I do about this? This is similarly a terrible situation. The Rebbe of Kotsk was known for his sharpness. He wasn't moved from the whole story. He didn't see that anything terrible happened. And the disciples, the followers, like, what happened? What? I just told you this moving story how until a few months ago, or a while ago, I was totally devoted to the study of Torah, totally devoted to prayer. I didn't have anything to do with this materialistic world, and all of a sudden, everything changed. Why are you not shooken up? Why are you not participating in my pain? So he told him, what do you mean? Who said, now that you are in charge of the business and you own the business, you could help other people out? You could support people that are poor, you could give people loans, you could help people. So who said doing the mitzvah of helping someone is any less important than spending your whole day learning and praying? Obviously, you have to learn and pray part of the day, but you're complaining you're not able to spend the whole day doing that. Well, who said, how did you decide? Why do you decide that this is more important than that? That's the story. And the message is clear. The message is there are people in different positions, and depending on what position a person is in, Hashem puts that person in, that is what his life's mission is. And each position has its advantage. Each position has its mitzvah, its commandments that come with it. And it's very hard to compare, or it's not even necessary to compare which one is more important. On the contrary, the position and the situation that the person is in, and the mitzvahs that he could do in that situation, that is what his mission is then. And that's exactly the idea behind splitting up the different tribes into the Jews into different tribes, and each tribe having its own banner, its own flag with its own symbol. The idea here is how each tribe had its individual way of connecting to Hashem, its individual characteristics and unique qualities, and how they connect in their service to Hashem. Let's take, for example, two, Yisachar and Zevulun. Already in the blessings to the tribes, it says Yisachar should be happy in its tents, their tents of study, and Zevulun in their business. Then it was a business regarding finding things, fishing and finding the diamonds and the treasures that are in the ocean. And actually, these are the two almost iconic tribes which present two opposite, or better said, two different characteristics. Yisachar always represents the one that is studying the whole day, that is in the tent of study of prayer. And Zevulun, the tribe of Zevulun, represents the one that is in business. It actually says that they made a deal between each other, right? The famous deal where Zevulun would support Yisachar, and therefore Zevulun had a large part in their Torah learning. They got part of the reward of Yisachar's Torah learning. They got because they supported Yisachar. So that's, for example, Yisachar and Zevulun. Let's take the tribe of Levi. The Levites and the Kohanim, the priests, they were the ones that were the teachers. They were involved in the tabernacle or the Beis Hamikdash later. That was the occupation. That's a totally spiritual occupation. And really, every single tribe has had their unique quality and their unique way to connect to Hashem. And that's why they were split into these 12, 13 tribes. And that's also the idea which was mentioned earlier, how there are 12 gates, one gate for each tribe. Again, which represents how each one has their unique way of connecting to Hashem and their unique way in serving Hashem. And therefore, they each one had a different banner. For example, on Reuven, on his banner, and so like we said, in addition to the colors on each banner, there was also a symbol. So on Reuven, the symbol was the Duda implant. May we recall back in the book of Bereshis, way back in the beginning of the Torah, quite a few parashiyos ago, the Torah relates how Reuven was in the field, and he found this plant, which was supposed to help his mother have kids, and he brought it home, the Duda plant. And by the end, Leah, Reuven's mother, gave it to Rachel. But the idea is that he brought these plants home out of caring, because he cared for his mother and he wanted it. He felt that these plants would have a benefit for his mother, so he brought it home. So that obviously represents the idea of care, of extra compassion and care that Reuven showed, and which even showed in that story. And then some of the tribes had symbols of animals on them. Dan had a snake, and I think Yehudah and Yamin had a wolf. So some of them had symbols of animals. And actually, the Rebbe once spoke how the ones that had symbols of animals, even though these are not kosher animals, right? Not animals we're allowed to eat, a snake or a wolf, but nevertheless, since they symbolize certain characteristics which were similar, which were identical to characteristics that tribe had, therefore they put it on their banner. So again, each individual banner really was there to show and to symbolize how there are individual and distinct ways of serving Hashem. And this also gives us a whole appreciation in the general, obviously it gives us appreciation in the general division of the Jewish nation into these divisions, because these divisions are not just technical divisions to make it easier to travel or to conquer the land of Israel, whatever it might be. Rather, there are deep divisions which show on different ways of serving Hashem. How each individual tribe had a very unique way of serving Hashem. Now, obviously, there are, like everything could be split into general rules, and then it could always be broken down into more particular details. So here also, you have obviously everyone serving Hashem, the Jewish nation as a whole. One goal, to make this world a place where Hashem's presence could be revealed, could be felt, where Hashem could be comfortable. So everyone does the mitzvot of Hashem, the commandments of Hashem. But then there is, what do you put your focus on? What do you put an emphasis on? And there are 12, generally speaking, there are 12 divisions, and that can be broken down into more. In each tribe itself, there was more divisions and more individual ways. And the idea here is that it's not about that one size fits all, that everyone has to have the same way. On the contrary, there are 12 general ways, and those are broken down into more particular families and more particular individuals, until each individual person, by the end of the day, has his or her unique way of serving Hashem. And this might give us some insight in this division to the 12 tribes. And this idea, which the Rebbe spoke a lot, how there are 12 tribes and each person has their individual way of serving Hashem and connecting to Him. And that's the lesson that we get from this division that seemingly, if we look superficially, it's almost like, why are you doing this to the nation? When we look deeper and we think more about it, on the contrary, there's such a beautiful message here, how everyone has their individual identity and way of connecting to Hashem. Any questions or comments? Yeah.
I have a question as to whether or not there's a particular significance to the sequence in which the tribes are identified at the beginning of the Parsha.
So I did see an explanation on that, actually, which, let's see if I could pull it up quickly. So I think every time they're mentioned a little different. Right, so Evan Ezra said that they were pretty much, the general way they're counted was based on the way they dwelled, they rest, the way they camped. That's how they're counted, with a few amendments, and he gives explanation why there were a few amendments. But that's his explanation. It is definitely an interesting point, because each time it's like there's like slightly different. Yeah. David?
Yeah, I wanted to say about when the tribes were able to finally intermarry, that was a big celebration. That was Tu B'Av, and it was considered a positive thing that the tribes, women and men, could intermarry from one tribe to the next. So I'm just wondering how that fits in, or it's not mentioned there.
Well, generally speaking, the tribes, which tribe you belong to, will go based on the father. So even if they marry into each other, but they still end up with the identity of a specific tribe, right? You still belong to a tribe. It would be, their descendants would be paternal, basically, in this aspect. So that the descendants will have a specific tribe.
But I'm asking that the mixing of the tribes, the breaking of the separation on
Right.
Tu B'Av was considered to be a positive thing. So I'm just wondering how that fits.
Maybe it depends why the separation is there. Separation is there because everyone has their unique way of serving Hashem, then it's a positive thing. If the separation is because, for negative reasons, because there's a fight or disagreement between the tribes, that's not so good. So perhaps that actually could support what we said. It's not about, not every separation is good, but a certain type of separation, when it's a separation because everyone has their way of serving Hashem, that's a positive thing. And there where it was because there was a disagreement between the tribes, so that it's a celebration when that went away and took care of. All right, now there's another idea, general idea in this week's Torah portion, which the Rebbe will speak about a lot, which is when do we read the Torah portion of Bamidbar? We always read it before Shavuos. Shavuos, the holiday that we celebrate the receiving of the Torah, Mount Sinai from Hashem, which is celebrated this year, this coming Sunday and Monday. And we always read the Torah portion of Bamidbar before Shavuos. So the reason, the reason on face value is because we always read in last week's Torah portion we had the courses, we had the rebuke, the punishment. So even though we always read that before Shavuos, we don't want to read that the week before Shavuos. We want to make a separation. So therefore, we read Bamidbar to separate between the Torah portion of which speaks about the rebuke and the punishment to the giving of the Torah. Because just to be clear, the Torah portions don't fall out on the same days of the month or week every year. Different days could have different Torah portions, right? It's a different cycle. The Torah portions go by the weeks, and the months don't go by the weeks. Not every day on the calendar falls out in the same week every year. So therefore, there could technically be different Torah portions read before different holidays. And here we have the specific interest that the Torah portion by Bamidbar shall always be read before Shavuos, for the holiday of the giving of the Torah. And there's also this idea that that's what this. Let's go back a second. So the simple reason is because we want to make this pause between the holiday of the giving, the rebuke, the punishment, and the holiday giving the Torah. But the Rebbe always says that nothing's by chance. And it's not just we took out any Torah portion and we decide, okay, we need to make a pause between the rebuke and Shavuos, and Bamidbar happens to be the Torah portion after B'chol Kosai. So it's going to turn out that Bamidbar be read always before Shavuos. No, that's not the way it works. There has to be a real connection between Bamidbar and Shavuos. And if from everything is in divine providence, for sure, such a occurrence, something that has to do with Torah, that's connected with Torah, for sure there's a specific reason and message in the fact that we're reading Bamidbar always before Shavuos. And the connection between Bamidbar and Shavuos, there's obviously many connections. I've spoken about this many times. But one of the ideas is, and which is connected to what we said earlier. First of all, we said earlier that where this idea of the Jews being arranged by flags, by banners come from, it came from them seeing the vision that they saw by Mount Sinai, the angels being arranged by banners. So right away there, we have a connection. But then this general idea of counting the Jews, counting each individual person. In counting, there are almost two opposites happening. On the one hand, we're counting each individual person. But on the other hand, each person is equal. Each person only gets one number, right? And which the idea here is that we need every individual person, and in a certain sense, every individual person, yes, being an individual, having his individuality and being different, and therefore we're counting that person. But at the same time, we need him to make up the whole of the Jewish nation. It says that by the giving of the Torah, if there was one Jew missing, the Torah wouldn't have been able to be given to us. Meaning each person there was important. And each person there played a equal role in making up the Jewish nation into one whole unit, and therefore Hashem gave us the Torah. We were a unit that was fit to give the Torah. And here it's like almost we have to pay attention. One could view it as this, okay, everyone is being counted equally, everyone's being counted the same, so no one really makes a difference. But the truth is just the opposite. Since everyone gives and adds their unique addition, their unique contribution to the Jewish nation, therefore each person is important. And therefore each person is counted equally, because each person adds and contributes to the whole of the nation. And that's why we read one of the reasons why we read the Parsha Bamidbar, which is the book of Numbers, which starts to speak about the Jews being counted before the giving of the Torah, because this idea that each person is counted and each person is important actually played a huge role by the giving of the Torah. Hashem said, I want to give the Torah to 600,000. Really, there's more. That's just the men between 20 and 60, the approximately 2 million people. I want to give it to them, and each individual person should have a part of my Torah. Another idea we say by the giving of the Torah, that it says the 10 commandments start with the phrase I am Hashem, your God, your Lord. And it speaks in the singular, not in the plural. And the Medrash says the reason for that being is because every Jew there felt that with me Hashem is speaking. Hashem is speaking personally to me. And therefore it says, because many times the Torah says, I am Hashem in Hebrew, Elokeichem, which is in the plural, the God of the nation. But here it says it in the singular, the Kecha, your individual God. And the reason being, like we said, because each person felt that unique and individual connection. And again, it's linked with that idea that each person has his or her unique connection to Hashem. And therefore, every person was counted, and every person was necessary to make up the whole unit of the Jewish nation and make the Jewish nation into a unit that's fit to receive the Torah. And every person felt that this is my personal connection. Hashem is speaking specifically to me. And which really is echoed in the whole idea of the theme of this class, that the point of counting and then camping individually is to emphasize, to show that every individual person counts and everyone has their unique mission in this world and their unique contribution to the Jewish nation. Right. Any questions or comments? Right. So it just will summarize what we spoke. We started off with an overview of the book of Bamidbar of Numbers, the fourth book that we're starting this week, which really could be split into two halves. First half are stories and occurrences that happened the first year the Jews in the desert, and then the second half, the last 5 Parshiot Torah portions really cover what happened the last year of the Jews being in the desert. So while the book of Bamidbar is a book of mostly stories and mostly describing different occurrences what happened, it really focuses on the first and last year, and the rest is covered very briefly. We spoke about this week's Torah portion. It really has a few topics. The first topic is the Jews being counted, where they're counted individually. And we pointed out the way they were counted, that Arizal's idea, how everyone's name was written down onto one list, and then they were sort of almost everyone's copied and pasted onto their own Excel sheet, and therefore the last tribe was just left on the original list, and they didn't have to be transferred to another sheet. That's why the Torah says by the beginning of each tribe, for this tribe, for that tribe, because the people that took the census were calling out this person for this tribe, and therefore they're this and this number for this tribe. The last tribe didn't have to say the word for because it was just left on the paper, and therefore it was just these are the people that are left, and these are the number of the final tribe. And then another topic of this, that's the first topic of counting. This next topic was how the Jews camped, how they camped in individual based on their tribes. Each one had a banner, and we brought out how this was something the Jews actually desired. They saw the angels had it, and they said, we want it also. And Hashem said, yes, I'll fulfill your request. We asked, what's the big idea? What's the big deal? Why is it such a special and unique idea that we want the banners? We wanted this personal identification. And seemingly, it's on the contrary. It's not such a positive thing. How we're split into individual units, and we're not just one unit, one nation. And we expanded how this division is really the way it's supposed to be. That's the way they split the land. That's the way Mashiach is going to bring back and tell everyone which nation they come from. And the question is, why this division? And the general idea that we developed, an idea that the Rebbe spoke about many times, how each person, how the idea here is that there's 12 ways to serve Hashem. And the banners and the colors on the banners and the symbols on the banners all represented each tribe's unique characteristics and unique way that they connected to Hashem. We discussed a few, Yisachar and Zvul and Levi, and really those are, and that's why there are divisions. And we developed this idea more, that in addition for there to be 12 tribes with 12 general ways of serving Hashem, then there also has to be, there's also it could be broken up into more until that each person plays a important role and an equal role in the fact that they bring something unique to the table. And that's why, connecting it to Shavuos, which is coming up next week, that is why the Torah, when the Torah is given, every single Jew had to be there, because every Jew contributes something unique to the nation. And that's why each individual person was counted. Right? Yeah.
When they talk about the 10 lost tribes, does that imply that everybody else is from the other two? Or does it also mean that the 12 tribes are all, there's 10 lost tribes, but they're all mixed in with everybody else?
Very good question. And I'm not 100% sure there is a very clear answer exactly what happened to the 12 tribes, if they came back, if even though the 12 tribes even though the 12 tribes left, were taken away, but could be some people from each tribe did stay, because around Jerusalem, people from all tribes lived. I don't know if there's a very clear answer for that. I have to wait and see to see what Mashiach comes up with, how he splits, how he identifies everyone.
I think it says that Mashiach will identify by smell, correct?
Yeah, which means he identified based on his spirit of Hashem, based on his prophecy. Yeah.
I know that there was intermarriage between the tribes, between the people of the tribes. So I'm sure that there were some from each tribe in the tribes that remained.
Right.
But I wanted to ask, where can I find the 12 symbols and 12 colors of the tribes?
So I could, the Medrash said, so the colors are the colors that's on the kosher, on the breastplate. The what is it called? The symbol.
But which color correlates to what tribe? That.
Right. So I could send you a link after the class if you reach out to me. Okay? I'll send you a link of an article that shows which ones had which colors and which symbols, or the source. The Medrash says which one. Sure.